Good morning, comrades. Today I would like to speak to you about the rise of China, and especially about how China figures into the power struggle that is going on today in the world. Now, someone said, I guess it must have been a couple hundred years ago, they said, China, it's a sleeping giant. Let her sleep, for when she awakens, she will shake the world. Well, China has woken, and it is truly shaking the world. Remember that China was a very weak country up until the time of the Chinese Revolution in 1949, when Mao Zedong took over and proclaimed in October of 1949, he got on the grandstand there in Beijing and proclaimed the birth of the People's Republic of China. Now, he fought a tremendous guerrilla war during the 1930s, and it was what they call the Great March. He lost I don't know how many of his comrades during that time, but he overcame these things. Now, was Mao a great leader? In many ways, yes, but he had his faults, and he made terrific mistakes. I mean, he started this great leap forward. I think it was in the 1950s, 58, 59, where he encouraged all the people to build furnaces in their backyards from melting steel, and that didn't work out. And they, instead of taking care of their crops, they worked on these backyard furnaces to make steel. And there was a massive famine in China, and I forget it was how many people, a couple 100 million that died of starvation. But on the other hand, he brought socialism to China, the economy. He jump-started the economy, industrialized the nation, unified the nation, And of course, so then we saw the great proletarian cultural revolution in the 1960s with the Little Red Book, the Red Guards carrying the Little Red Book, and anyone who was an intellectual, they had to be educated and work in the fields and whatever. I mean, it was not a very happy time. But then eventually, of course, Deng Xiaoping came to power. And he started China on a new path. Really, it was a capitalist path, you might say. I mean, he said it doesn't matter if a cat is white or black as long as it can catch mice. And in other words, it was no longer a sin to be rich or to be a capitalist. The main thing was the economic growth of a country. In China, being a country of such huge population, and a very intelligent population, well, he started these new economic zones in certain cities, a limited amount of free enterprise, still controlled by the Communist Party, of course. Well, China's economy started taking off in the late 1970s. And to make a long story short, I mean, China is now one of the greatest world powers that we ever seen. Next to the United States, it's the greatest power in the world, both economic power and as far as military, they have a very strong military, but probably not as strong as that of Russia. But Russia and China combined would be a formidable enemy to the United States. And of course, the Pentagon knows that. So, but with the current leader of China, Xi Jinping, I read his book. He wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Governance of China, and in it he tries to write out a plan for the coming years for China. And he says that in another, 20 years, that he wants to make China a what do you say, a thriving socialist middle-class society without any poverty. And he talks about Chinese socialism, in other words, socialism with Chinese characteristics, and also about the quote-unquote China dream. Now, this man is not a warmonger. He's not China is not an aggressive country like the United States. It never has been, really. I mean, it's been always it's the oldest continuous civilization we have, and they were very, very inventive centuries ago. Gunpowder, paper. They had these huge ships that were even larger than anything that the Europeans made, and but they were not out to conquer the world like the Europeans were. So then they built a wall around them so they would not be subject to the intrusions by the so-called barbarians. There was people from Europe. But at any rate, sometime, it's almost certain, in the 21st century, China will be the dominant power in the world. The only way that the United States can prevent that from happening is to start a nuclear war with China, and probably Russia would get involved too, which would be a disaster because it would mean the end of the human race. It would mean the end of civilization on planet Earth. And so far we've only came close to that one time, and that was in October 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And of course, because of the John F. Kennedy, we have him to thank that the world today is still intact and was not destroyed in a nuclear war, which would have happened had people in Washington, D.C., that were warmongers, and that includes most of the people at the Pentagon. Curtis LeMay, for example, he wanted Kennedy to attack the Soviet Union in October '62. Curtis LeMay, the man who was responsible for bombing the hell out of Tokyo and responsible for giving the okay for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which were totally unnecessary. That man was a vile person, a total warmonger. Okay, so anyway, the bottom line is this. Capitalism as a system of economics is done for. Now, China is using capitalism as an intermediate means to industrialize. They say eventually the capitalism of China will be transcended into and then eventually a communism. But for now, there are capitalist enterprises in China, but they are subject to control from the state, the Communist Party. It's not totally free market, although there are some elements of free market. It's not totally free market. And it's the same with Russia. But see, the United States wants total corporate control of the entire world. There is where the problem is, comrades. What we need is a socialism that shall be constructed on a spiritual and not a material basis. I mean, Marxism-Leninism had its good points, but it's passé. It's of the old age. It's of the Piscean age. We are in the Aquarian age, and we need a new socialism. A great teacher once said, you cannot put new wine into old bottles. New bottles for new wines, comrades. Thank you.